Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mengs, and today I'm going to be doing a video which I think a lot of you guys will find interesting. Today I'm going to be ranking all the commanders in Advanced Wars 1. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the reboot is coming out on the 3rd of December, and with it I imagine a lot of people will be asking questions like, who are the good commanders in this game? Who are the bad commanders in this game? How do they stack up against each other? As you all know, Advanced Wars is not a balanced game, and there are vastly different power levels between the various commanders. Now, the reason why I'm starting with Advanced Wars 1 is because I'm going to be doing a separate video for Advanced Wars 2. If my guess is correct, they're going to be releasing these two games as two separate ones in one. So there's going to be an Advanced Wars 1 reboot and an Advanced Wars 2 reboot. There are different commanders in each game, and the rules changes slightly from game to game. So in this video, I'm going to be rating each commander with a rating. I'm either going to rate them as S rank, A rank, B rank, C rank, or D rank. So that gives us 5 different tiers. With that out of the way, let's get started. Now let's begin with everyone's favorite stupid kid, Andy from Orange Star. Now Andy is marketed as this jack-of-all-trade commander which has no weakness, and that is his strength, but the truth is that having no day-to-day powers in Advanced Wars is a big weakness. Yeah, sure, Andy doesn't have any weak units, but he also doesn't have any strong units, which kinda just makes him very mediocre. His power, Hyper Repair, allows him to heal 2 HP to all of his units globally. And this power can be situationally very useful. Sometimes it can allow you to cap a property which you otherwise would not be able to cap. It will allow you to swing a draw into your favor. If you have 2 units that have just duked out, you pop Hyper Repair and then you attack. You usually have a bit of an advantage. But it's not really a power that's going to majorly shift the balance of the game towards you. Hyper Repair is just kinda there. It's nice whenever it occurs, it isn't really game-breaking when it happens. As a result, Andy is a C rank tier CO. He is not bad, he's just not particularly good either, and that makes him not stack up very favorably against some of the better COs in this game. Still, he's a solid choice if you just want to play a game. He's never a bad CO to pick. The power level between the Advanced Wars 1 COs is not as high as the power level between the Advanced Wars 2 COs, but Andy sadly still isn't up there with the best ones. And then we come to the direct combat specialist Max, and hooey, if you don't know how broken Max is in Advanced Wars 1, just allow me to give you a comparison. So in Advanced Wars 2, Max has a 20% firepower increase for his direct vehicles. That's considered quite strong. It's very difficult to go effectively head-to-head against Max unless you have really favorable terrain, or if you have some indirects helping you out. In Advanced Wars 1, Max has a 50% firepower increase for all of his direct vehicles, which is ridiculous. You cannot safely go up against Max. Even with favorable terrain, he will wipe you out. You need indirect units, and it's very hard to set up indirect units against Max. I mean, he will have tanks everywhere. The moment he spots them, he will take them out so incredibly fast. He also has a ridiculous power when he pops Max Force. Not only does he get even more firepower, but all of his units also move 1 space faster, which allows him to close the distance, it allows him to take out your indirects. It is a nightmare. Going up against Advanced Wars 1 Max fairly in a one-on-one battle is not possible. At least not if the commanders have some degree of equal skill level. Max is going to be a commander that, unless they do something to him, he's going to absolutely break the metagame. He will be banned in tournaments for sure. People will just not be able to go up safely against him. There is one other commander in Advanced Wars 1 which can give Max a run for his money, and I imagine this commander is not really going to be available to most players. But yeah, Max is an S rank CO. He is by far the best commander in the game in Advanced Wars 1. He's going to be ridiculous, and he's going to make people complain a lot. So up next we have the infantry specialist Sami, and unless they do something in the reboot to nerf mech spamming, I imagine a lot of people are gonna find her extremely annoying to go up against. She is an infantry specialist, which means her infantry or mechs are much stronger, they capture properties faster, her transports also move faster, but she does have a slight firepower decrease on her direct vehicles. Her tanks are a little weaker. However, her indirect vehicles, such as artillery and rockets, are not. So with most Sami players, I imagine their unit compositions will be tons of infantry and mechs, and then artillery and rockets to back them up. And that's going to be very annoying for people to go up against. Now, Sami is a commander that gets progressively better the smaller map she's on. If the map is very small, then mech spam becomes very viable. However, on larger maps, her power level does decrease somewhat, as mechs become less relevant. You will need the power of vehicles to reach the middle properties and actually capture them. If you just spam mechs on very big maps, that's not really gonna work out as well for you. Sami's power is also very terrifying. Her double time allows her infantry to move much faster, and it also allows them to ignore terrain, so they can just run across mountains, which is very deadly. Now, she doesn't have the insane power to instantly cap properties that she has in Advanced Wars 2, but Sami is still going to be a pretty terrifying enemy to go up against in Advanced Wars 1. She is a B-rank commander. She's definitely stronger than Andy. She's not quite up there with the strongest commanders in the game, but I imagine a lot of people are not going to like going up against Sami. There's going to be a bunch of complaints, and I actually imagine certain tournaments will probably outright ban mech spamming, just because it's so boring to watch. Up next, we come to the Blue Moon Commanders, and we're going to be starting off with the chief himself, Olaf. Now, Olaf is a very interesting commander. He's a weather-dependent CEO. He has no day-to-day firepower increases or decreases, but he completely ignores the movement penalty of snow. However, if it rains, he will treat that rain like other commanders treat snow. So he'll get the -1 line of sight in Fog of War that everyone else gets, but his units will be much slower. For this reason, you might want to avoid selecting random weather when playing as Olaf. You might think it's nice that sometimes you'll get extra snow, but you could also get a lot of extra rain, and that will really hamper you. You may like the gamble, I personally do, but for consistency it's probably best to play with clear weather when you play as Olaf. Now, Olaf's Blizzard, his power, makes it snow for a day, and when used correctly, this can be extremely devastating for your opponent. Most CO powers in the game are all about pushing forward and killing your opponents, but Olaf's Blizzard slows down the enemy. And this can be really strong if they're about to do a big push or if they're about to take one of your properties. Personally, I like to pop Blizzard just before the enemy CO is about to get their power, which statistically you will get because Blizzard is a pretty cheap power. So for example, if you go up against a really strong CO like Max, you can pop your Blizzard just before he gets his max force, and he will be very reluctant to pop his power during the snow, because he'll be slowed down, he'll get a lot less out of the power. So if used correctly, Blizzard can be very good. However, Olaf, I still wouldn't classify him as a very strong commander. I place him as a C-rank CO on the same power level as Andy, just because he doesn't really have any day-to-day firepower increases. That makes him a little tricky to play. He is one of my favorite commanders. I do like playing the lower-powered commanders, but he isn't very strong. However, his Blizzard can be used strategically very well if you know what you are doing. Up next, we come to the indirect combat specialist Grit, and if you thought people were going to complain about Sami, oh my god, just wait until people start going up against Grit in competitive multiplayer. People are going to be so mad, there's going to be so much complaining that this guy ruins the game. Of course, his playstyle is extremely annoying because he is an indirect combat specialist, meaning all of his indirect units have increased range and firepower. However, his direct units have lowered firepower, and this includes his infantry in Advanced Wars 1. This is a big distinction to make. In Advanced Wars 2, Grit's infantry are actually not weaker, but they are in Advanced Wars 1, which means that his capture game is going to be absolutely pathetic. So there are ways to beat Grit, but what I envision a lot of people will do is they will make like a wall of artillery and rockets, and they'll just creep it forward slowly, inch by inch. And if you try to attack him, he'll just blast you to smithereens. And that's going to be incredibly annoying to face. In addition, his power snipe attack increases his range even further, and in Advanced Wars 1, Grit's power actually increases his range by 2, not 1. A lot of people will make this mistake. They'll think he works like in Advanced Wars 2, where he gets 1 range from his little power and 2 range from his superpower. No. In Advanced Wars 1, Grit gets 2 range from his little power, which makes him devastating to go up against. However, Grit is going to be a very map-dependent CO. On big, huge maps, he's not going to be as strong, but on smaller maps, he's going to be an absolute terror. But, again, if a match has a time limit, then Grit automatically becomes way worse, as his capture game sucks. So if you set a time limit of like 10 to 15 days on a match, Grit is not going to be as strong, but if you give him infinite time to set up his push, yeah, that's going to be incredibly annoying to face. As a result, it's a bit hard for me to rank Grit, because on smaller maps with no time limit, he's like an S-rank tier CO. Like, it's going to be impossible to beat him in that scenario, because again, he'll just set up a wall of artillery, and he'll just slowly creep forward until he blasts you off the map. However, On larger maps, more balanced maps, Grit is around a B tier. He's still going to be really hard to face, but there are definitely ways to beat him. If you can rush him with recons and tanks and other fast units, then he doesn't really have a good response to that. And again, his capture game sucks. His infantry deal 20% less damage. He's not going to be able to interrupt caps with his own infantry. So what you can do is you can try to push him out via the capture game. You can just send a bunch of infantry across the map, try to win via properties, and Grit will then have to use his expensive artillery and rockets to try and interrupt your caps, which means they can't shoot on your other units, and that's kind of how you go up against him. So I envision he will be around a B rank CO in multiplayer matches. So up next, we come to the Yellow Comet Commanders, starting with Kanbei, and he is quite formidable in this game. Now, most new players may take a look at him and they may think, okay, here's the commander that trades 20% more expensive units for 20% better units. That seems like a fair and balanced trade. But it's actually way better than that, because you're not only getting 20% increased firepower, you're also getting 20% increased defense, which is insane. Defense in particular is a very valuable stat in Advanced Wars, because when you stack it with terrain, your units just become incredibly hard to kill. Kanbei tanks on a city have 50% increased defense. They are almost impossible to kill. It's really hard to take cost-effective engagements against those tanks. So you may notice that even though Kanbei has 20% less units than you, his units just don't die, and as a result they just tend to accumulate over the course of a match, and in the end he just overwhelms you with sheer power. It's really hard to go up against. He also has his CO power morale boost, which increases his firepower and defense even further. It's not as strong as you may think. It's actually sort of mediocre in Advanced Wars 1. It only gives him roughly 10 to 15% increased firepower and defense, but that's still an extra bonus that he adds on top of his already high quality units, so you may feel it regardless, and once Kanbei starts to snowball, that moral boost will start to hurt more and more. And as a result, Kanbei is just really hard to go up against. He's just really strong. He's an A-rank commander in this game. You will find that when you go up against him, it's just incredibly hard to find cost-effective trades. Of course, just wait until you go up against him in Advanced Wars 2, that'll be a topic for another day. But yeah, in Advanced Wars 1, Kanbei is pretty freaking strong. Next up is the commander Sonja, who specializes in Fog of War, and she is quite a unique CO in this game. She gets 1 extra vision in Fog of War, which is quite nice, and she also hides her unit's HP from the enemy. So when you go up against Sonja, you don't get to see how strong her units are. It just says question mark, which is quite annoying. It means you have to memorize what units you've dealt with. This can actually be circumvented by turning on animations, as you will get a glimpse of how much HP they have there. So when playing against Sonja, I guess you should insist on having animations on, as it kind of makes it easier to keep track of her units. But you still have to memorize, you still have to remember which units you damaged, and more often than not, you'll find that you'll waste one of your units taking out one of her damaged units. So when playing as Sonja, definitely keep your injured units as fodder on the front lines, because most of the time your opponent will not be able to tell which unit is damaged and which unit is not damaged, and that is quite valuable. Sonja's power allows her to see into woods and reefs, which can be quite devastating on maps with lots of such terrain, and it also further increases her vision range, which is even better. However, Sonja is plagued by bad luck, and she has quite a lot of it too. She has a bad luck modifier of 20, which means that her units will deal around 0 to 19 less damage. Now, of course, she also has good luck like every other commander, so it'll usually end up somewhere around minus 10%. Now, I'm actually making an entire video on the luck mechanic. It is probably going to come out in a few days from now. If it isn't out already, I'll link to it in the video description if it is. So definitely check out that if you want a more in-depth explanation on how luck and bad luck works. But for now, just remember that it reduces the damage she deals by a random amount. And this does make Sonja pretty hard to use. I'm going to have to give her 2 ratings here because, of course, being a Fog of War specialist, it's apparent that she is much better in Fog of War. If you don't have Fog of War, then Sonja is a D-rank commander. She is garbage. She's just weak. I mean, she still hides her HP from the enemy, which can be annoying, but that is not enough to make up for the 20% bad luck that she gets. It is going to be incredibly hard for you to use her. But on a Fog of War map, I would say that she is a B-rank commander. Like, the fact that she can see longer, that gives her a huge advantage, and the fact that she can spot your units hidden in the woods, that really makes it hard to use indirect units against Sonja. In fact, when going up against Sonja, I would just advise you not to deploy artillery and rockets in forests, because she will just be able to spot them, and it'll suck for you, because she'll just send her recons in and kill them. So definitely something to keep in mind there. In Advanced Wars 2, she gets that insane counterattack firepower increase, which makes her really hard to go up against, so she's a lot better in that game, but in Advanced Wars 1, she doesn't get this power, so she's just kinda meh in combat, but still a really strong commander on Fog of War maps. Up next, we come to the Green Earth commanders, starting with the air specialist Eagle, and he is quite a terror. All of his air units have increased firepower and defense, and on a side note, they also use a little less fuel per day, although this is not really something you tend to notice a lot in multiplayer matches. However, his naval units have greatly decreased firepower. But, as we all know, naval units are completely irrelevant, so this isn't really something you tend to notice a lot. Besides, his boats doesn't have reduced defense, so his landers are fine. You can use landers just okay with Eagle, you just can't really use battleships, cruisers, and submarines to any great effect, but those units almost never see play in competitive multiplayer, so this is a weakness that you can practically strike as being non-existent, unless you're playing on a map which forces you to use naval units. And on such a map, you wouldn't pick Eagle to begin with, so again, this weakness is irrelevant. You can look at Eagle as a commander that has no weaknesses, but also in addition to that has strong air units, which makes him really good. However, what is truly terrifying about Eagle is his power, Lightning Strike. I do believe they call it Lightning Drive in the reboot. I did remember seeing some footage of that, but I'm gonna call it Lightning Strike because that's what it's named in Advanced Wars 1. Lightning Strike allows him to take an extra turn. It doesn't affect his infantry, as that would be quite broken, dual strike, but it does allow all of his other units to take an extra turn. Sure, it comes with a firepower and defense penalty, but that doesn't really matter if you can use it to wipe out all the opposition. Now, you gotta be careful, of course. You don't want to place your units in a position where the enemy can just drive over and crush them, because the defense penalty is quite steep. You will notice that your units will fall a lot quicker. But the tactical powers that Lightning Strike gives you more than makes up for this. You can use Lightning Strike to move in with your air units, deliver a really deadly strike to the enemy, and then you can use Lightning Drive to get the air units out of the enemy anti-air range, which is incredibly devastating. And it also affects his ground units, so you can use it for a ground unit push in the same way. You can also move his indirect units and attack with them during the same turn, which is really broken. Of course, they will do less firepower, but it's still going to be devastating if you do this with rockets. So Lightning Strike, easily one of the best powers in the game. It is very expensive, it takes a while to charge up, but when it happens, man, it is deadly. It is extremely deadly. So I imagine Eagle is going to be one of the best commanders in the game once we go into competitive multiplayer battles. He's an A-rank CO, he's extremely strong, and his power is going to be used to devastating effect. So up next we come to the Naval Commander Drake, and if you've heard me talk about naval units, you probably have realized that they're not very good in Advanced Wars. Naval units are simply too expensive to be used in competitive multiplayer matches. I mean, battleships cost 28,000, that's way too much. So unless you're playing on a huge map with tons of properties, you're just not going to be able to see those units, and so you're not really going to be seeing a lot of Drake. Now, his naval units are fantastic. They get one extra movement, and they have increased defenses, which makes him really hard to go up against on a map where you're forced to use them. So imagine on like an island map with no airports, Drake can probably be pretty viable, but in any other scenario, he's not going to be a very popular commander. Now, he does have a pretty valuable power. His Tsunami deals 1 HP of damage globally to all enemies, and that's kind of good. I mean, if you use a lot of Tsunamis over the course of a match, then that's going to be a lot of value that you're going to be taking away from your opponent, so that is a good power. Of course, if you go up against Andy, he will just pop Hyper Repair and counter it, so don't go up against Andy if you're playing Drake. That's a really bad thing. However, Drake also has the massive weakness of having way less firepower on his aircraft, and air units are quite important in Advanced Wars. Battlecopters, probably one of the best units in competitive multiplayer, and the fact that Drake's battlecopters are so weak, that's a big weakness for him to go up against. He's not really going to be able to utilize battlecopter to any degree. He can still use transports just fine though. He doesn't get reduced defense on his air units, just reduced firepower. Drake also has a hidden aspect to him that is not listed in his CO description, but it is certainly mentioned in the game several times, and that's the fact that when he is around on random weather, he increases the chances of rain to occur. Additionally, Drake also does not care about the movement penalty from rain. Rain makes it harder for treads and tires to move on plains and forest tiles, but for Drake, he just ignores that penalty and can move through it just fine. However, Drake will still suffer the -1 vision range that he gets from the rain if you play on Fog of War, so do be wary of that. If you have a lot of indirect units, that rain can really screw you over if you can't see your opponent, so You may not want to play Fog of War if you play as Drake, but you might still enjoy the rain coming every now and then. On a side note, he is devastating against Olaf, because of course Olaf, he doesn't like rain. So if you play Olaf and your opponent wants to play Drake with random weather, that's not going to be a very favorable matchup for you. And as far as his rating, again, on a map where you're forced to build ships, if you play on an island map with no airports, I could rate Drake as a B rank commander, but in any other aspect, he is a C rank commander. He is just not that great, even if he has a pretty interesting power. Now that we're done talking about all the regular COs, it's time to talk about the two final ones that you unlock at the end of the game, and we can start with everyone's favorite blonde, Nell. Now, Nell is probably one of the most underappreciated commanders in the game, because she revolves around luck. Now, as I said earlier, I am working on a video talking about the in-depth mechanics of luck in Advanced Wars. It's a very complicated topic, I'm not going to go into depth about it here, but to shortly summarize it, Nell has a chance to deal more damage. Every CO has luck in this game. There's a small luck modifier which randomly increases your damage dealt. Nell has more luck than any other commander, and when she pops her power lucky star, she gets even more luck. I think it's up to 60%, so her units can just end up dealing a lot of damage. And the fantastic thing about luck damage is that luck damage is just added on top of the damage you already deal, meaning that sometimes your infantry will be able to wipe out a really strong unit like medium tanks, because again, luck damage is true damage. It's just added on top of the damage you already deal. So it's very valuable in that sense. There's a lot more complicated mechanics going into calculating luck, and again, I'll talk more about that in the video, but needless to say, luck is very overpowered. Even if it's not reliable, it is extremely strong, and as a result, Nell is an extremely strong commander. She's still only A rank, she's not quite up there with commanders like Max. Max will still destroy her because Max just deals a lot of damage all the time, but Nell can still go toe-to-toe with pretty much any other commander in the game. Her good luck will just constantly increase the value of her troops, and whenever she pops that lucky star, she can attempt to take some very risky gambles, like sending infantry up against medium tanks hoping to take out a chunk of their HP, and most of the time it should work. Statistically, she's likely to do about 3 HP of damage to any unit she goes up against on a random number generator, of course, because she picks a number between 0 and 59, so she's likely to end up somewhere in the middle. So Nell, a really strong commander. I imagine she's going to be very hard to unlock in the reboot, and she might be banned from tournament play, I don't know. And then we come to the last commander, the final bad guy of the game, the Black Hole Commander, Sturm. Now, Sturm is a very unique CO, because he actually works differently depending on the game mode you meet him in. In the campaign, when you face off against Sturm, his units have higher firepower, but lower defense, which actually makes him quite easy to go up against. You can smash him with a CO like Max. He also has the added benefit of being able to traverse terrain. He moves over terrain regardless, like his infantry can run over mountains, his rockets can go through forests, which really gives him a crazy amount of mobility. And of course, he has the strongest power in the game with Meteor Strike, which just takes out a huge chunk of damage when it hits. It deals 8 HP damage, it's ridiculous. However, when you select Sturm in Versus mode, you actually get a different version of Sturm, a little bit less powerful version of Sturm. Instead of having increased firepower and lower defense, this Sturm actually has improved defense and lower firepower, which is a very interesting way to play because it means his units are just really hard to take out, but they won't really do much. So it's just very hard to kill. However, he still has the added benefit of moving through terrain with no cost, and his Meteor Strike, although it is nerfed a little bit in Versus mode, it only deals 4 HP damage instead of 8, is still ridiculously strong, because doing 4 HP damage to a huge blob of enemy units is still valuable as hell. So for that reason, Sturm is an S-rank tier CO. He is really good. I don't know quite how he matches up against Max, but I imagine he would be able to give him a good run for his money. His Meteor Strike is just so incredibly valuable. And he is banned from War Room, by the way. At least in Advanced Wars 1, you can't select him. It's kind of funny. So they knew he was really strong. He's definitely one of the most powerful COs in the game. Again, not sure how much he matches up against Max. Would be interesting to try that out someday. But yeah, he's definitely going to be banned from tournament level play. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so that is me rating every single Advanced Wars 1 CO in the game, and here is the final tier list in case you want to take one last look at it, with all the commanders and their ratings. Now, it needs to be said that this tier list isn't definitive. Like, you can still beat an A-rank CO with a C-rank CO if you are a better player, or maybe if you have some other situational circumstances that gives you a benefit. It's not impossible. And you may also disagree with this list. If you do, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section below. But considering they're probably not going to make any changes to the reboot, I mean, they're calling it a port, I do think that this tier list is still going to be pretty relevant once the game comes out. It should give you a little bit of an idea what COs you might be going up against and how much of a chance you have depending on your skill level and their power level. So, with that out of the way, guys, do you agree with this tier list? I'd love to hear about it. Slash the like button and subscribe for more Advanced Wars content. Thank you for watching. My name is Tim Banks. Bye-bye.